thank you again for coming. Really appreciate it. So let's wind back the clock. Let's go all the way back. How? Tell us about your history, how it all started. What was that spark that kind of lit the fire going, and take us back to Australia and the humble beginnings.
Well, I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, the city, and none of my family were in the film industry or had anything to do with film. But my mum was an amateur painter, and also she took me to art galleries like when I was very, very young, since I was like about 2 years old. We would go to see a lot of exhibitions and photographic exhibitions, and also my family, we went to the cinema a lot. So I kind of grew up with cinema and art. And when I was in high school, about 13, 14 years old, I had a black and white dark room in my back shed that my dad set up for me, and I was developing and printing my own black and white photography. And I think I sort of, when I was thinking about what I was going to do as a career, I sort of put all those things together that I loved and thought, well, it just seems like cinematography is a perfect job for me. I love art, I love cinema, I love photography. I went to university. I was doing a humanities course. I was doing like a film theory, an academic film theory course, and I spoke to the teacher one day and said, what I really want to do is be a cinematographer, and I want to work on movies. And he said, well, I've got a couple of friends in the film industry, and one of them's making a feature film right now. Do you want me to call him? And he did, and I got a job as a runner, and I was 18 years old then. So I got a job driving the film to the lab and driving the actors around. And while I was there, I would go and talk to the camera department and sort of hang out with them a little bit and say, this is really where I want to be, and can you help me out? And by the end of the movie, a couple of them gave me contacts of people they knew. And I started, I left university then. I left and never went back.
The decision was made.
The decision was made. And I started working in the bottom of the camera department. I did apply to film school when I finished high school, and I didn't get in to the AFTRS. And I have to say that film school just gave me an honorary doctorate, and which is pretty funny. I know, they didn't let me in. I think it was because I was young, but also whatever reason they didn't let me in at the time. And I'd get together with some of the other younger people on the crew, and we would shoot little things on the weekend, or somebody's friend needed their music video to be shot, so I'd go and often do that. And I taught myself how to shoot and how to light, and by doing it. By actually just, doing little things here and there. And I shot some documentaries after that, and I went through a couple of lean times. But I always tried to keep shooting something, whether it was really super low budget or no money, or doing something myself. To keep working. I don't think there is an answer to that. I think everybody, once you're moving up in your career, there's going to be a lean period in between. And I don't know, I just remember eating, tins of tuna and bread rolls and stuff for a couple of weeks. And, when I was first started, when I was younger, and yeah, I just think, if you're passionate and you believe in it, then you're just going to attract things and attract the work eventually. And just to let everybody know that you're around. And I worked for nothing for a long time at the beginning of my career to make connections, and I think that that's really important. Is keeping, when you're on a job, is saying to people, well, I'm here, and if you're doing something else, don't forget about me, and then every so often ringing them back. And I think, I was talking to someone the other day about this, is one of the best experiences for me was I went to Vietnam and shot a documentary with, there was myself, there was only 4 of us. There was myself, the director, a producer and a sound recordist. And we're shooting on film, and we were there for 5 weeks, and I never saw any of my dailies, and I had to do everything. I had to load my own mags and tape it up into the cans and watch it go away by the freight on the freight trip back to Australia, and I never saw anything till I got back. But what it taught me was really about images and about working on the fly and about trusting my gut feeling about how to expose film and how to use my light meter, because in those days I didn't see anything. I didn't see any of the footage till I got back. That was a really good experience for me.
So I'm sorry. So the early lessons learned: stick with it, be persistent.
Yeah.
Don't take no for an answer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I mean, when I first started in the film industry, I'm sure it was the same here. There were hardly any women in the camera department, so I just sometimes I had a bit of a tough time with it was mainly the grip and electrics, I have to say. And, like they would make me carry everything, and then they wouldn't help me pack the truck at the end of the day, or, move stuff around. So I sort of ignored that and just persevered. And it's always like, I think after a couple of weeks, I because I was never sort of aggressive back to them. I was sort of just doing my job and trying to be a team player. And so after a couple of weeks, people kind of just forgot about that, that it was an unusual thing for a woman to be in the camera department, and we all just were a team together, and it, it worked out well. So. I always had commercials to fall back on and fill in time, and meant that I didn't have to take it still feel like that now, that, in between movies I do commercials so that I don't have to do a movie for financial reasons. I can always doing a film because I love the story and I want to work with that director. And, so I think that doing that movie, and I've done a lot of international commercials in Australia, like when people were coming over and they were doing facilitating work there. I was shooting a lot of big jobs there, so
you make those contacts, which then help to transition.
Yeah, and that made it easier for when I moved over here.
Okay. So commercials versus music videos versus feature films, they're very different. And different techniques, different lessons learnt with those, right? I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, I still really like going back to... I haven't shot a music video for a really long time, but I really like doing commercials in between, because I get to work with different directors, and also a lot of them are pretty big budget productions, so I get to test new gear or use a new camera, and I use it for that a lot, to say, I'm doing this is something I haven't done before, so why don't I test the ARRI 35 that just came out? Or,
what a coincidence.
Or something like that. So I kind of use it as a positive thing to and to meet new people and meet new directors, which I really enjoy. I didn't start shooting digital until I felt like it was as good as film. And I remember speaking to people like Tom Siegel and I can't remember who shot one of the first Star Wars, and they were shooting on those really early iterations of digital cameras. And I said, why are you doing it yet? Because it's, why aren't you shooting on film? Film still looks great. and they said, well, they wanted to be part of the development of it, you know, to give feedback and to help the manufacturers improve the images, you know. Whereas I didn't do that. I didn't shoot on digital until Alexa came along. And I think the first film I shot on digital was Truth. And so we shot Australia on film. We still hold the record for shooting the most negative ever on a feature film. It was from Kodak. It's 2.1 million feet we shot.
Wow.
And yes, and in fact, we shot so much film that they're now making that film into a limited series called Faraway Downs. Before then, I think I'd shot Lantana, and that was the biggest film that I'd done, and that was like a $12 million film. And then I'd worked with Baz on the Chanel No. 5. Well, we called them short films because they weren't commercials. They were like 5-week jobs, and we shot, you know, a lot of footage on those too. But after I'd shot that, and then he said to me, he called me in for a meeting and said, I really want you to do Australia, but I know this is like a $130 million film and you've only done $12 million film before. But I've been doing a lot of big TV commercials, like car commercials and quite high budget, you know, American commercials that were sort of action films and different types of things. And I remember I just said to him, I know I haven't, but I can do this. And one of the things he said to me that really resonated, that I never forgot, and I say it to other people, is he said, you know, I've worked with you, I know your capability as an artist and a technician, but now you have to be a general. And that meant I was going to have 200 crew beneath me, you know, because we had 2 other units working and our main crew was 100 people. And so that was something I had to navigate and worked out. And yeah, that was a big step for me.
But that part of your experience was earlier, back when you were in Australia, where you learnt teamwork and you learnt how to lead a team. And right.
And I have to say, the thing that I worked out on Australia was working on a small film, you know, and lighting smaller sets. I remember my gaffer actually said this to me because he'd been working on Star Wars and Matrix and he'd been doing some big movies. He's Australian because we shot in Australia. And he's a gaffer that I've worked with now for 25 years. Anyway, he said to me one day, because we were looking at, you know, a gigantic set, and he said, Mandy, it's just the same but bigger. And I went, oh yeah, it is. It is just the same but bigger. Like, instead of lighting, you know, a room that's 30 foot and there's 2 windows, I'm lighting a room that's 100 foot and there's 30 windows. So I have a light for each. You know, it is. It's just you have more lights and you have more cameras. And so once I kind of got that into my head, I sort of just went with it, and it didn't daunt me at all. And also you get more prep on a bigger film, so you get a chance to work things out and to test things and go back to the sets a lot and go back to the locations a lot and kind of nut things out. Well, I always do a lot of tests. Elvis was the most tests I've ever done. But I always like to see how far I can push things, but every tiny little... When I'm reading a script, I write down any idea of something that may be a lighting thing or a lens thing or a specific thing that's in the words, you know, in the writing or the scene descriptions. or if it talks about a certain mood, then I write all these things down and then I try and test as much as I can. And then what I do is have all the other departments. I visit the other departments all the time. Like in my week, I'm always going over to, in pre-production, I'm going over to the art department and checking in with them, going to makeup and checking with them, going to construction, and going to the sets a lot, so that when I'm doing camera tests, I get all the elements I possibly can. For instance, like in that Vista liner, which is Elvis's motorhome at MGM, that with the red and the gold and the black, I knew that we were going to have to do a shot that, telescopic crane move from one end to the other and out the windscreen. So I made sure that I did tests where we measured it all up, and I knew that the lighting wasn't going to be in shot, and any ideas that I have the possible stitch-ups or possible things that I'm going to come up against, I try and test them, and making sure the lenses are right, making sure that my lighting ideas are right, as much as I possibly can. Rehearsing with Austin, who is incredible, as everybody can tell, and he was doing his choreography, rehearsing and singing, and my people were there watching. So I had the grip and electric there watching, the dolly grips and the lighting department, and I got them to learn all the songs, so everybody knew the cues, everyone knew the songs off by heart. But then we would rehearse with Austin and do dress rehearsals, so that we would be rehearsing first of all with viewfinders, and then we had the actual cameras on stage with him. And that was also for my team to work out and know, okay, he's going to slide across there, or he's going to put his hand up right, and I'm going to be ready for that. But also so Austin felt comfortable with us being there. So he knew, like I had a 45-foot Scorpio crane, telescopic crane, was going to come in from 45 feet away, right up into his face at a certain moment, and he felt comfortable. So that was really important. I mean, and then, as well as being really planned, at the end of each of the sequences, we would do what Baz called riffing, and that meant that we would go handheld, or we would, be doing things that was more spontaneous, or that we would see as we were shooting something else. And he and I don't operate on a film like this. I mean, I keep seeing like photos of me with the camera on my shoulder on this movie, which is probably the 2 times that I ever did it, and to look at something. But because if we had 3 cameras every day, and then occasionally we had one, like there's that sequence in the closet where we had 1 camera, because you just can't physically get 3 cameras in there. And then the concert sequences we'd either have 4 or 5. So I never wanted people just to be fishing for shots, or using the time to be sitting back, or I never have camera operators sitting around on set. I always find something for them to do. But this time I had them really well rehearsed, so that it was efficient, because we shot that film in 93 days, I think, and there's more than 100 sets and those gigantic concert sequences. So we were super, super prepared. But like I say, the dolly grip, who's worked on pretty much all his films except Romeo and Juliet, I think, he would stand there and sort of, if the dolly grip had an idea about, maybe we should just go in here, if I go in there a bit earlier, or the focus puller feels comfortable to go to Baz and say, when he turns to her and he knows it's, this is going on, do I pull then or then? Like, he just gets everybody, like I said, he's a master of collaboration and respecting everybody's job, and that people are there involved, and then everyone feels like they're involved in the filmmaking process, and they're not there just being, you know, Bob, you're over there doing your job and you're not, you know, respected, or I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. And I'm the same. I think that I listen to my people, and I have them there because I think they're great at their job and that they should be involved. And testing does that because it makes me feel confident in the ideas that I've had or the equipment that I have, you know.
So the important characteristics for you: skin tone, dynamic range.
Oh yes, sorry, I didn't get very technical.
No, you're good. You're good. No,
but
you're good.
Dynamic
you're good.
range.
Yeah.
I do well because I come from film.
Right.
The tests that we did on film was when we're testing film stocks. You test how far you can push the highlights and how dark you can let the shadows go, and I still do that. I mean, I expose and I look at an image like I did when I was shooting film. And I learnt when I was lighting, I used to look at stills photography, and Ansel Adams, and I don't know if you guys know Ansel Adams, did the zone system, invented the zone system, which is about he shot black and white, and the way he looked at an image was having something white, all the grey tones, and something black. And what that does is gives you through like a version of 3 dimensions, or an illusion of 3 dimensions, because we're shooting in a 2-dimensional format. And I still overexpose on digital, like I did on film. I used to overexpose film by 2/3 of a stop to a stop to give yourself more information in the negative, and especially in the shadow area, because on film you will maintain your highlights more than your shadows, or go darker in the shadows. But I remember shooting this film called Tracks, and we were out in the desert and the skies were really bright, and we're shooting on Kodak. And I remember thinking, and looking at my spot mirror and going, they've lost the detail in those clouds for sure. And then I get back in the DI and they're there, you know. So film was always like that. The highlights were being protected much more. But so I look at that. I look at and I look at skin tones, and I look at colour. And then I get as many elements of something that's going to be in that scene as possible, and put them all together. Like, I'll get some curtains and go to the art department and say, got any idea about what colour the wallpaper's going to be, or do you want me to test some textures? So I do that a lot. I do it as much as the production will let me, so that I know exactly what I'm doing when I turn up on set. I don't like ever to be somewhere and feel like I'm not prepared.
And how about depth of field? With the Alexa 65, it's an enormous image canvas. We talked earlier, Mini LF. You've shot a lot of projects on the Mini LF, which is the large format, and then you've got the Super 35. So how does that play a role in your creative decision making and with the depth of field?
Well, I've used the Alexa 65 on 3 movies because I felt like it was appropriate for each of those films. It was The Mountain Between Us, Mulan and Elvis. And for The Mountain Between Us, I did the tests. I did then it was the Alexa XT, and Alexa 65. And what it did was, the larger format, I had more detail in the snow. It was set in the snow. And so there's a lot of white, and I had different skin tones. It was Idris Elba and Kate Winslet together in the white snow on top of a mountain with no lighting, and I had to get the exposures right, and it was sunny, and it was extreme circumstances of contrast. But what I found with the 65 was that I had more detail in the whites and in the shadows, so that's the reason I use that camera for that. And for Elvis, like I said, it was about scale, and he was epic, and I feel like it's the most epic image to see, a 65mm shot of that Vegas showroom, the whole stage, and to me that was the best way to represent that. But I also find with that camera, and I go back to the reason I look at films like Lawrence of Arabia. And you have epic scale, but you have intimacy and you have intimate close-ups. And that camera, because it has a lower depth of field and you're not shooting on such a long lens to get that feeling, that you have both. So when you're really close on someone's face, you can use depth of field to focus the audience on just their eyes or their mouth or something and throw the background right out. So that I love that about that camera, you know, and I can have a 50mm wide shot of 10 people standing, 20 feet away from the camera, and I can throw the background out of focus. So I love having that flexibility, because if I can do that, then I can always shoot it with a, close the iris down if you're outside and have more depth, or have more light. But I like to be able to shoot it in a situation where there is a low depth of field, and it gives you that magic, I think. Well, I think because, first of all, reproducing these concert sequences, there's a lot of lights in shot, so I had to have period lighting fixtures. So I had a lot of those, but to integrate that with as much LED lighting and film lights as I possibly could, because it's going to give me more flexibility. If I've got, for instance, these, which I had replicating basically what park hands do, old rock and roll park hands. So I had park hands in shot, but I had orbiters as well that were doing the same thing, but they'd be out of frame. But I can control the colour and the intensity of them from the dimmer board, and I had everything set up on an iPad that would walk around set with me and the gaffer. So I had as much LED lighting as I could, and some of the lighting fixtures I put S60s into and dressed them to look like old TV lights, like those, scoop lights. But also, I sort of rode this very fine line between having exactly the same lighting, the train spotting lighting, and making it a little bit more complementary. So if, for instance, when you're in the NBC TV station and they're using like their old Fresnel lights and there's big horrible shadows on his face, and if I did exactly that, it just, you couldn't see his eyes, and it just looked like ugly lighting from that time. So there was a way that I had to integrate that lighting to look like it was realistic, but also look a bit more beautiful and complementary on Austin. So that's where I had LED lights come in, and they would be kind of rounding out the image of the harder light. And I also tried to backlight him all the time in that TV studio. And I do this thing all the time. I do this now a lot, where say we're doing a shot and we're moving around 180 degrees around a character, or even 360 degrees. I'll chase the backlight on the dimmer board and have it move around with the camera. And if you have someone really good on those controls, you don't notice it. And so I tried to keep him backlit all the time, and then the same when we were on stage on the big Vegas concert. When we had the camera turn around, we're behind him, I would have all the lights that were on his back off and just use the follow spots. And when we were on him from the front, I had 3 follow spots lined up, and I would swap them around depending on which angle we were on, so we didn't have a camera shadow, or we weren't completely flat on his face sometimes. But I had 3 of them for different angles that I would go between the 3. And I remember saying to my gaffer, and I sat down in pre-production on Elvis, and he said to me, I think we better get some rock and roll lighting people in, because, we've got the showroom to do, and it's such a big setup, and we have to shoot it over all these different periods of time, and we have to have big lighting changes. And then the next day we turned up at work, and I looked at him and went, I think we can do this. And he looked back at me and goes, yeah, we can. And so we
Nice.
did it, and we did the research, and we found the lights, and we worked out how to do it and how they would do it and how they did it in the 70s, and we found period lighting. And so to me, that was the biggest challenge. And like I said, I don't ever like to think that there's not a way. There's always a way of doing something where you have no money, or you have all the money that you possibly can on a big budget movie. Even though I have to say, on every film, I'm always taken into the office before we start shooting and I'm over budget. And you never have enough money. But what I try and do is, give myself those challenges, and because we had to reproduce a lot of those concerts had to be exactly the same. And I think we were talking about this before, that apart from the three styles of camera work on the movie, I also had to do what Baz called train spotting, which was reproduce the concerts exactly, which was the 68 special, Russwood, which was the concert where he gets dragged off stage, and that had been documented by a stills photographer called Alfred Wertheimer on some 16mm footage and still photography. I had to reproduce that, and the Vegas showroom, and that was all on set. That was not on a stage. It was a set that ran from backstage down the side of the stage, and then we built a third of the audience, and we shot that because it's a huge stadium. So then it was the rest of the audience was replicated in VFX, the other 2/3. That set was gigantic, and we had to we shot it as in the documentary, because that's the way it is. There's an existing documentary on that first Vegas show. So I had to reproduce all the colours of the lighting, where the cameras were going to go, what lenses that each camera was on, when they were going to zoom in, when they were going to zoom out. What we did was we shot him walking from backstage down side stage onto the stage, and he did the concert. We did that in one go. We did a 20-minute shot each time, a 20-minute take. We had, we shot it for days, but each time we did it, we did the whole thing, and he did the whole concert, and we did it in one take. And so the rehearsing of that and the logistics of that and getting the lighting to be doing the changes at the right time was a huge undertaking, but I just made sure I rehearsed it. I made sure I kept going in there and testing them, that making sure that all the cameras were in the right spot, and also talking about multicam, I have to say, is a thing that I've learnt from doing it quite a few times, is I don't want to stitch myself up lighting-wise. So I make sure that whenever we're shooting, like for 5 cameras, for instance, that none of them are shooting on the wrong side of the lighting. And because I don't, and if someone doesn't have a shot, I'll get them to start preparing for when we turn around or something like that. So there's a way of doing it. There's a way of having 5 cameras going and getting all great images, but you just have to be really prepared and think about it and plot it properly. And like I said, I never want to have cameras just fishing for shots. I hate that. I hate it when I see someone sort of panning around and doing this in the middle of a take. I just say, don't do that. You find a shot first and shoot it, or you lock on something and stay there, and if you think of something else, we do it on another take. But it drives me crazy when people are undisciplined about framing.
Thank you again for coming. Really appreciate it. Congratulations. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.